Done this 3 years in a row, and it's time to disclose the companies that I think are the cheapest rates in insurance across the board. A lot of things have changed. You're watching all over this channel where Allstate raised their rates, and Geico is raising their rates, and Progressive may do it as well. And there's a ton of different companies that are having these rate increases. There's actually a few of them that are having rate decreases. So that's something you want to stay tuned to the channel for, because we're going to announce some of that information, which is super helpful because some of these great companies out there are actually not hurting as bad, like I said in several videos. Going forward, let's talk about the 5 to 10. It's kind of a mixture of companies that are giving the cheapest rate. Keep in mind, it's not necessarily the best company or fit for each individual, but on average across the board, these are the companies that you should be looking at. You may see me look over to the side because I've got my monitor over here because I've pulled up 4 different companies. We've got WalletHub, we've got Bankrate, we've got Policy Genius, and we have MarketWatch. So I'm taking some of the collective data. The issue that you're going to see is you got to be very careful when you start searching this. If you were to go to Google and type in the cheapest insurance, you got to look at the details. Most of these companies don't have the information yet. And a lot of them, what they're doing is because JD Power, which is a big resource that gives a lot of the data out, or at least organizes it, they usually put out the cheapest prices. Well, so far, they've only given out the information for the claims service. So what a lot of these companies are doing, these are the main ones that I've found that are mixing the claim service with a whole bunch of other metrics. I think one of them was that they put together 1,000 surveyed plus people, 2,500 data points, 43 different companies reviewed. So when we're looking at this information, you got to see how new the data is. Most of it's from 2021 and 2020. Some of them are. So just be careful if you're going to research that. By the way, if you are shopping for new insurance, I'll put a link in the description below to a company that I would recommend. It's one of the companies that I've been working with that does shopping up to 30 companies. If you want an easy, low hassle way to get a free quote, then you might as well check that company against several of them. Most of the companies that we're talking about today, or at least several of the companies, are in that specific company. So if you're interested in it, go ahead and check it out below. Otherwise, let's dive right in. According to WalletHub, Geico is number 1 at $700, but they were only rated a 2.7 out of 5. So not so great as far as the service, handling, and overall. You guys in this channel have chimed in, and I get more negative comments about Geico than I get positive, but the prices are there. So they're definitely winning that battle. USAA, it's a little tougher to get into because you have to be part of the military or have a family member of the military in order to join them. They're about $898 according to WalletHub. State Farm, Chubb, and Allstate, those are the next in order. That's from WalletHub. From the Bankrate, you're looking at Auto Owners, USAA, Geico, Amica, and Erie. And we'll go over and I'll kind of break this apart. With Policy Genius, theirs is a little bit more in depth. They had up to 10 companies, which some of them I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth. But we have Auto Owners. Westfield got in the mix. The small issue is they're not in most states, so you're not going to likely have that opportunity. USAA, Erie, Geico, State Farm, Farm Bureau, Cincinnati, Countrywide, and then Grange, also decent company. With MarketWatch, we've got USAA, Erie Insurance, State Farm, Geico, and Progressive. That being said, we have to dive into the typical person. The average in these cases are based on the average person. However, one thing I've noticed that in most of these researches, they lowered the coverage, which was weird because when you look at my past videos, the typical person had average credit, which is pretty normal. They had 100, 300 for the coverage, and then a 2,000 whatever on newer vehicles, so within 5 years. This one bumped down to 50 and 100,000 for bodily injury. So everything that we're talking about cost-wise, I would give it a leeway of about 10 to 15% that it could be more expensive if you're expecting these prices, and obviously it depends on the state and the driver and all of that stuff. So let's dive in and talk about the age ranges that it matters, the people that have tickets, the people that have DUIs. What are your costs looking like, and which is going to be the best company to go with? The number 1 company, USAA, in the main category, they're a great company. They have fallen quite a bit from their pedestal in the last, I would say, 3 years. A lot of reviews are from clients that have been with them from X amount of years plus. I'll actually link up a video where I talked about the USAA Smart Ride system and the actual review of them. And it wasn't so great. The company in general is losing a lot of their long-term clients because they're getting tighter. They're getting a little bit more specific on things. The cool part is if you're on a military base, you get a discount where you actually don't pay the extra cost for having that there. There's like discounts for situations like that. Although all of the people don't have to renew their license that's in the military, so your license might expire, but you can still keep the insurance. Outside of that, you can't really buy insurance without the license, sort of, in most cases. It's just a hassle. It's a hard thing to get. Then you've got Erie Insurance, which is another review that we did. I'll link that up here, and they're just a bare bones. There's nothing special about them as far as the review that I did at the time. I don't really love them as an option. They're okay. They're just kind of like one of those, meh, right? If you want a good deal and it's a decent company and the reviews in your area aren't bad, then sure, why not? State Farm also did a review on them. I will link that here. They were a good company overall. I think they're probably the best fit in general for a little bit of the younger crowd, where you have students that are kind of hitting that 25-year-old range. If you had some DUIs for some reason, they're fairly competitive, although even though Progressive, we'll get back to that, they seem to kick in a little bit better in that situation. And then you've got Geico. We talked about them just a minute ago, so I won't go over that. We've got Progressive, which a year ago or 2 years ago, I touted, I think they're one of the best companies out there, and I still think they're really powerful. They're one of the leading companies in the independent space. The State Farms and the Farmers and wherever you can physically go to an office, typically that's an exclusive insurance company. Those agents can only sell that brand. And if they're competitive and great, that's good. Hopefully you get a great agent and it works out. The independent is growing more and more, where Progressive is taking over that ownership, and actually Liberty Mutual is trying to join into there with Safeco and all of those companies. But that part is where you can shop around multiple companies. That's basically the link that I have below. That's where it shops around different places, and usually you get an agent. So you still get the benefit of having the agent. You don't have the losses where you're worried about someone fighting for you and taking care of you. But also, if something goes wrong, they can just reshop you. You can go around from one company to the next. Not that you're going to bounce around, but it gives you the opportunity to have more options. So Westfield is a decent company as well. The problem is they're just in not many states. So we're going to kind of exclude them out of this one mainly because of that. USAA is in a handful of states, so I personally wouldn't exclude them in the review. I think they're one of the top contenders to be one of the top 5 insurance companies to look at. Just be very careful. Like I said, you should watch that review to make sure that they're a fit in your state. It's always fun to say top 5 cheapest and most expensive. So according to this, the top cheapest states, the top 5, we've got Ohio at $939 on average. We've got Wisconsin, which is about $970 on average. And then we've got Maine, $1,013. Those are your top 3 as far as the states that are the cheapest. You've got Vermont at $1,029, Indiana $1,106, according to MarketWatch. The top most expensive, although it's switched, this is kind of, once again, this showing some of the data isn't 100% accurate because some of it's been updated. Michigan's list is number 1, $4,430. Not true anymore. Michigan had a PIP reform where our average has gone down about $600 or $700, but I believe Alabama has surpassed us, and now they're one of the more expensive. They have New York as second, Louisiana, not Alabama, I meant to say Louisiana earlier. They have passed Michigan as well, and then Florida is creeping up or jumping up there as well because of the home market. And then we've got Nevada, which there's a few companies that are really competitive in there. Nevada, the cool part is that even though they're fairly expensive, their prices, in my opinion, haven't been as impacted as much because you've got a handful of the major companies like Allstate and some of the independent agents that are really doing well in that state. Now, that's the average customer. For what about those people that want the state minimum? So you want just more of just the basic bare bones policy. That person we're looking at, Geico, is listed as number 1 according to Policy Genius. We've got State Farm second, which they're fairly okay. I don't know if I would put them second. Honestly, I would put Nationwide, who's third, ahead of State Farm. American Family, I would probably also put ahead of State Farm as well, just because I know that they're fairly competitive with the more the state minimums, which is usually your younger drivers, higher risk type people, or your average person could just want just the basic coverages. Travelers, I would put after State Farm, so I put State Farm and then Travelers. Also Progressive, I would throw there anywhere in the mix. I would always throw them in the mix because they're competitive in those medium risks market and not necessarily the high risk. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. That's like one of those that you always should check. Hence why they're in the link description below with that company. So they're usually with almost every single independent agent. When you're shopping around, you're almost always going to hear Progressive's name come up at some point or another. You've got Allstate and Farmers and USAA. Clearly USAA is still in the mix, but it's not really their target type of person. The person that wants the state minimums, or if they're a younger driver, they're usually a little bit higher of a risk, so you're not likely going to see them in that category where they're competitive. According to Bankrate, the cheapest insurance by age is Nationwide in the #1 spot. They said 16 and 17-year-olds are about $1,100 a year, and then your Geico starts to kick in when you're 18, 19, all the way up to 24, where Nationwide kicks back in at 25, and then it's kind of like a battle back and forth. So you're looking at Geico and Nationwide as two competitors. One of the things that Nationwide does really well is if you're a new driver and you're just starting off where you haven't had a car, they don't have a penalty for those that are just purchasing a vehicle. It has to be done quickly, so there's only a few days that you can have between purchasing the car and starting the insurance, but they're going to give that extra piece where they're not going to surcharge in a lot of those states. There's not an extra cost. Travelers peaked in a little bit. When you're in your 40s, they kind of showed up, and then Nationwide kicked back in and just said, in general, we want to be competitive. Now, that's not to say that you're the perfect fit either way, because you got to remember, this is a profile. Every person has what I call a profile. Your credit plays a factor. For example, with Wallet Hub, if you have a poor credit score or credit in the world, that's an insurance score, which is a little bit different, but it's pretty close. There's a video if you guys want to watch the actual details of what an insurance score entails that goes into more in depth. But Geico is going to pop up and be very competitive with the credit score. USAA is decent with poor credit, but on my review, when you look at that, it's kind of a 50-50. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But according to this, they are. State Farm is kind of a flat across the board. I would say they're probably the most average company when it comes to credit score. I've done multiple reviews where I've done State Farm versus Allstate, State Farm versus Farmers, State Farm versus... There's a ton of them if you watch this channel. But in most cases, when credit played the factor or DUIs played the factor, State Farm was pretty close. They were sometimes high, sometimes low. So average, I think State Farm would be a good choice. Allstate is decent with poor credit. They actually came in 4th there. And then Kemper, which oddly showed up. Something I haven't researched a whole lot, but I know they're a fairly large company that have been growing. They're in the mix of that. So what prices can you expect? Let's talk about the DUIs. If you have more of a driving while under the influence for the cheapest car insurance, then you're going to be looking at State Farm, which I don't know, maybe not. They say that they're competitive, but in my review, they weren't as competitive as I would like them to be. I believe Progressive passed them, which is 2nd place in this portion, where they said $146 if you have one versus $95 if you don't have one. This is probably the state minimum coverage. Progressive was $147 versus $116 if you didn't have one. USAA was 3rd, which I don't think is very accurate because I don't think USAA is a very good fit in general. If you have a DUI, you can try it, but there's not a good chance. I wouldn't think that they're even competitive. 153 versus 84. Geico was 281, which I'm not even going to put Geico in there. Geico is not a good fit in most states, in most cases. Clearly, like I said, profile matters, where they just don't like them. It's like for some reason that piece throws Geico over the board when I compare them to most companies. I would say let's remove them from this list. Nationwide is fairly competitive, but they surcharge. They say $287 with, $120 without. I would add another $50 onto both of those ends because whenever I quote Nationwide, it tends to go up quite a bit. Allstate is kind of like State Farm where they're kind of up and down. They don't care or they do care. So they're saying $356 with the DUI and about $202 without. I don't think that's accurate. I actually think that's a little bit more expensive than what Allstate typically charges. I would say they're the opposite of what I'm talking about with Geico, where they're probably about $50 cheaper than that in general. Keep in mind, these are the stats that are coming from. This one's from MarketWatch, which is from 2021 to 2022 data. There's a Quadrant company that does research and several other of their own research portals where they have multiple quotes and multiple policies. But it also depends on what type of vehicle they're plugging in, what type of average credit that we talked about, the liability limits, and the state. That all makes a difference. So across the board, those are the numbers that are averaging out. And there you have it. Those are the top 5 to 10 cheapest insurance companies in the United States. The ones that if I were to rank them to summarize this, I would always put Progressive in there. Almost every time they have some sort of fit in the market. They're like that guy you always got to check, right? Hence the link below, because that works with Progressive and the Nationwides and your Allstates and some of your other companies that have those options. You've got that. Geico, if you're a young driver, those are probably your better fits. If you have a little bit higher risk, want lower coverages, or you want have an accident, things like that, Geico is an option. Keep in mind, reviews aren't amazing for them. I did the video there that you can check out, but those are the ones. State Farm, we're checking in probably half of the states. If you're in Texas, if you're in Alabama or Louisiana, those states are pretty decent for State Farm. Same thing with Allstate. Whenever State Farm shows up, Allstate's probably the competitor there, and you want to check both of those at the same time. Nationwide, once again, that's like the next step with Progressive. Those are the head-to-heads, in my opinion, that are very similar to each other. Nationwide has the mileage program, so if you don't want to do a telematics, you can say I drive low mileage and they can track the low mileage. You get a discount for that. They give you a base pay plus an addition. There's a review here. We've done them all, man. We've done all the reviews at all the companies. No, we got a lot to go. Those are the routes that I would take. Those are the companies that I'm looking at. That's the stats that we're getting from multiple sources. And that's the pieces that I've personally organized for you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know what state you're in and what you found to be a good fit. Let's share the knowledge to other people in this chat so that we can get that info out there. It's always helpful if you found a good state and a really good fit for your scenario. If you want to learn more about the insurance score and how it affects you, I'll go ahead and link that there. Also, if you're going to do an online quote, if you don't want to just skip to the link, I would say check out the way that I would shop for insurance. That's going to go over not just going to different companies, but checking reviews, checking different scenarios, and the way that I was taught as a kid to shop for car insurance. The thumbs up helps the most. There's donate options below. Otherwise, I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.